Cognitivism has been guilty of a long-term neglect of emotion. In the history of science, however, this has not always been the case. Antonio Damasio points out that at the end of the 19th century, Darwin, William James, and Freud all studied and wrote extensively about emotion. Why then was emotion neglected for 100 years? The simplest answer, which Damasio favors, is benign neglect from neuroscience. Attention, perception, memory, and language were preferred as objects of study. A more profound explanation could be Western culture's suspicion of emotion, seeing it as unreliable and ultimately unimportant. Such views can be traced back to Plato. Susan Greenfield provides an example of this traditional but simplistic view of emotions. Greenfield sees emotion as concerned with purely passive interactions with the environment, limited entirely to the present and generally involving only the pursuit of pleasure. She claims that to be emotionally aroused is to revert to an individual throbbing sensual present. But there is now an alternative view, namely that emotions represent millions of years of evolutionary wisdom, genetically pre-programmed, active responses to the environment. Also, Greenfield neglects subtler emotions, for example, care and nurturing and joyful social play, as we shall see below. Again, Greenfield equates emotion with a diminution in our sense of both meaningfulness and selfhood. She says, quote, "It could be the case then that the more emotional you are, the less the world around you means anything, and the more you have literally let yourself go," end quote. Whereas the emotion theorists below assert the exact opposite, that emotions are our principal means of evaluating the world and thus assigning meaning to it. Greenfield says that drugs, childhood schizophrenia, and even dreams too, can lead to, quote, "a failure to generate and access the large neuronal assemblies that give rise to the adult human mind," end quote. In other words, they wipe out the self. And again, Greenfield emphasizes that her model of the self is an entirely cognitive construct built on neural networks which have already been effectively simulated in artificial intelligence systems. Quote, "These dynamic connections between neurons enable reason and thought, those cognitive phenomena that have already been successfully modeled in artificial systems and which normally develop with age along with the growth of neuronal connections," end quote.